Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Firstly, thank you very much for joining us on the latest of our Q&A sessions for the early years sector. I'm absolutely delighted that we're joined today by three highly respected experts within their field. Firstly, we have Jonathan Broadberry, who's here from the NDNA today. Secondly, speaking today will be Tricia Wellings. Many of you will know Tricia for her legendary work on funding and supporting businesses. And then thirdly, we've got Maureen Askew, who's also talking today about how we can improve our businesses at this somewhat tricky time. I'm sure all of you will have seen the announcement from the Chancellor yesterday. It was interesting, wasn't it? Certainly some positives for all of us as employers, but frankly disappointing for all of us in the childcare sector. I know Jonathan wants to talk about that at length, so I don't want to talk over his bit. So I'll leave him to talk about the NDNA's response to that. But just to talk about the format for today, if you could all ensure you're on mute whilst the speakers talk, please. That's really, really important. Otherwise, we have children in the background and phones ringing and so on and so forth. I'm sure everybody's used to that now. We're in a Zoom world. But if you can make sure you're on mute. The speakers will talk for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then they would love to answer any questions you have. If you could pop those in the chat box. So at the bottom of your screen is an icon marked chat. If you pop any questions you've got in the chat box, and the speakers will do everything they can to answer your questions as soon as they finish their talks. I'll read all of the questions out and sort of explain them to the speakers, and then we'll go from there. So you haven't come here to listen to me today, so I'm going to keep my part short and I think hand over straight away to Jonathan. So Jonathan is what are you, Jonathan? I can't find it. Head of Policy and External Relations at NDNA. And so we're thrilled you've joined us today, Jonathan. Second time we've asked you to join and put you on the spot. So thanks for joining. And over to you. Tell us what NDNA's response is to our friend Richie Sunak's talk yesterday.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Alan. Yes, I'm Head of Policy and External Relations at NDNA, which means I lead on our work looking at government policy and where improvements can be made. So no small task at all. But yeah, so in terms of the Chancellor's statement yesterday, we've responded quite strongly that with disappointment that there was nothing mentioned in there in terms of funding for early years. The Chancellor talked about this being a plan for jobs, but he seemed to completely miss out the fact that for a lot of people to return to work, there needs to be that childcare in place, and the fact that the sector is facing real challenges, real crises at the moment. I always feel in these kind of talks that I love hearing from people about the great work that's going on with children and the practical side of things with with child development and learning opportunities and all this great work that's happening in the sector. And I come on and I feel like an ogre because I'm always talking doom and gloom about finances and the need for funding and support, but it is absolutely crucial. So I'll just give a short kind of précis of the main points from yesterday's announcement that do affect the childcare sector and our reaction to some of that. But then I want to go on to talk about a bit more about support for your businesses and the sector, as people start to move beyond lockdown, but then also the immediate and longer term funding challenges and why we need that emergency support now. So one of the main things that came out of the Chancellor's speech for the sector is this job retention bonus, which is for all employers who bring staff back from furlough and keep them employed between November and January. The Chancellor's promised a £1,000 bonus to the employer themselves, so it's not like the other parts of the scheme where the claim is passed straight on to the employee. This is if you keep them on if they are paid at least £520 a month and they are still in employment at the end of January, by February you should be receiving those bonus payments. Obviously, not wanting to look a gift horse in the mouth, any help is always appreciated, and it will have value for a lot of employers, but at the same time we know a lot of people are really worried about, are they going to make it to Christmas? What's going to happen to the funding come September? What are local authority plans? And so the promise of a bonus in February might not help people in the decisions that they're making now. So it is a nice idea, but in terms of practical support to the sector, it's not an immediate source of help. And the other point that we're making already is that it's another way in which the way the sector is funded and the way support is structured, as we hope inadvertently, but it's inadvertently penalised the sector, because we know that even where settings didn't have enough children to remain open, they weren't able to furlough all staff. So whereas a cafe or a bar that completely furloughed everybody would get that bonus for all of their staff, if you'd done like a half and half furlough or kept some of your team on, then this is another way that you're missing out on an opportunity, and it's precisely because of the way that government have structured the support. There was no news on the business rates holiday, whether that would be made permanent, because that's something that we've been calling for. And then the other main points for the sector were around the funding for apprenticeships. So taking on apprentices, that has been increased and then brought in as well for if you take on older apprentices. And similarly, the funding for taking on traineeships, so where people are doing level 2 and level 3 qualifications. A grant has been announced for employers doing that. What we don't know yet, we're waiting for the detail on, is whether childcare will be seen as one of the essential criteria that are needed. So we're still awaiting some of the detail on that. The Chancellor spoke about construction and engineering, because they've got a big push on infrastructure projects. So those traineeships we know are likely to be included. We don't know whether childcare qualifications and the placements associated might attract that. So it's a really disappointing situation overall. We put together quite a detailed briefing for officials and for MPs, and we did see some of the MPs raise questions about it. We worked quite hard with Stella Creasy, and Steve Brine has got a meeting with the Chancellor to talk about the sector's issues, but that's taken a lot of work to get there. And MPs have a lot of other issues going on in their local areas. They've got a lot of underemployers worried and employees worried as well. So I'll come on to that in the final part. And then I wanted to talk about, have early years policy issues changed because of COVID? And the sort of pithy answer is yes, and fundamentally no. So yes, in terms of responding to COVID and making sure all the practical measures are in place around infection controls, managing staff and bubbles, which are still going to be in place for our members in Scotland and Wales, but will be taken out when it comes to the end of towards the end of July in England. But I think I don't know if anyone's had a chance to read the interview with Zoe Raven about the outbreak that they saw in Milton Keynes, but I think that really emphasised that you can't. It's difficult to go to a position where you've got absolutely no bubbles, because if you've got no understanding of which children have been in which groups, it becomes much more difficult. If you do have a case, you could face the situation where 20, 30 children and staff who've all worked together over the course of a few days might have to self-isolate in the unfortunate incident of a positive test. So whilst the relaxation around bubbles I know will help and will help management of rooms and staffing, there is still that fact that if a case comes back in settings and we're likely to see more local lockdowns like Leicester, that knowing minimizing that mixing and knowing who's been in a group with whom will be absolutely vital. But when I say it hasn't changed as well, coming back to the fundamentals, we always talk about wanting the best quality for children, the best outcomes, the importance of the workforce in delivering that. Fundamentally, it all comes back to the funding and the income that people are able to bring in, and we know that for the government hours, it's not enough. It's not enough to deliver the high quality that we want to be able to do as a sector. And likewise, parents, we're looking at unemployment figures, we're looking at the likely recession that's coming. That's going to put real pressure on parents being able to afford childcare, especially as those controls and those additional members do increase costs, and the basic cost of delivering childcare is going to be higher and higher for the foreseeable future. That's why what we're campaigning for at the moment is a recovery and transformation fund, and we've called it both because in terms of transformation, we know a lot of work has gone in with physical adjustments, whether that's just the way you lay out your rooms with furniture. Some people have talked about protective screens at reception desks, changes to staff areas so that staff can be changing or cleaning, and all the day-to-day running, that staff time is going to be taken up more with cleaning, that you've got more protective equipment to buy, more cleaning materials. All of these factors drive up your day-to-day operating costs. So that's all part of transformation. So making those physical changes, installing new sinks, all of that side of things, but also recovery, because it's not just one-off expenditure that you'll need help with. That there is a recognition that over the coming months, delivering that service is going to be more expensive, and that providers are going to need help with that, because otherwise it's going to have a very damaging effect on the sector. Our research with members suggests that about 72% of people expect to be running at a loss until September at the very least, and that's reduced capacity, reduced occupancy, and those higher running costs that we're talking about, and that's just not sustainable. And we've said that time and again. We've presented the evidence to ministers, to MPs, and we're not stopping with that. That's carrying on. But at the same time, we're also supporting the sector. We've got freely available resources for practitioners, for managers, supporting children when they're coming back. They've obviously had a very traumatic period in their lives, transitioning back into nursery. Some we know take to it like a duck to water, don't want to leave at the end of a session, but we know that for others, especially working with those vulnerable children and families, it's been a little bit of a challenge getting the parents to re-engage with nursery and bring those children back in as well. So we are worried about the attendance figures, and the fact that it's recovering, but really slowly, a few percent increases every week, and again that feeds into the lobbying work that we're doing for that recovery funding, and also trying to get the Department of Education to actually engage with parents about the confidence to return as well. And so the last point that I just want to touch on quickly before we go to any questions and answers is around our work as a national organisation, but the importance of providers and staff and practitioners, talking to parents and getting people involved from your side as well. So we've had a series of announcements in the last few weeks and months about schools and about the money that they'll get and the things that they need to provide education. And part of the challenge is that for politicians and for parents, the majority of their thinking about education happens in schools, and we know just how important early years is as a distinct stage of a child's development for their long-term outcomes, but also for their social development as little humans. So we're always producing materials for our members to help them have those conversations with politicians, whether that's your local MP, whether it's local councillors, because we know as well that councils have a really a real impact on providers' lives, and the difference between having a supportive council and one who's less understanding can be really make or break. We've supported members in Wirral, for example, who before the National Discretionary Fund was announced, Wirral Council were worried about their the providers in their area, and said we've pulled together some money to help support you through this, because we've seen that you haven't got support from other areas. And that came out of conversations with officials, but also with councillors in that area, and that's providers coming together as a group and working with the local authority. It doesn't happen in every area, but it can happen, and that's what we try and hold on to, is that it's not going to work every time, but it can work, and we always support people with that. We provide resources for people so that when they're, if you're talking to your MP, you guys have the power. We can produce statistics and research at a national level. We can produce all the arguments, but for a locally elected person, it's the impact you have on the families in their communities. It's the importance of you for people being able to return to work. It's the support you give to those 2-year-old places that that really benefit from being in a childcare setting. That is the powerful things that will help cut through. We'll always back that up with those national examples, with those national briefings, but we always try and work with providers so that you've got the resources to make that case for yourselves as well. And that's where the power comes in, where you can bring that national experience, those national figures, and tell your story with it as well. And that's what we always want to be doing. So we have seen MPs start to stand up and talk about childcare. We've seen Stella Creasy, Steve Bryan, Jess Phillips, and it's like turning the oil tanker. We're trying always to fight against the kind of it's only schools argument, and it was bitterly disappointing that these kind of bounce back funds for education completely ignored further education and early years, and we're never going to stop making the case for early years, but I suppose that final point is just about involving you and that local voice that you have to make sure that it's getting across as well. So I'm happy to wrap that up there, Alan, and take some questions. I've seen some comments have been popping up as I've been talking anyway, but if anyone's got questions, like I said, we've got resources, we've got information on our website about things like furlough scheme that's I know is still a concern, and bringing people back onto the flexible scheme. So I'm happy to try and answer general questions, but we've also got our legal helpline for members if they've got specific issues with contracts, staffing situations and things like that as well.
Lovely. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for that. So did I hear you correctly? Did you say 72% of settings expect to make a loss until September? Did I get that right?
Yes. So when this was in the beginning of June, when people were starting to reopen, we asked people whether they would be reopening, and the vast majority, so over 80%, said that they would be, either expanding what they'd been doing during lockdown and taking on more children, or reopening from scratch. But when we asked about the kind of occupancy levels people were expecting, the vast majority were around a third of the children that they would normally have. Some people, and it depends entirely on the area you're in. We know this, that if you're in an area where a lot of parents have returned to work already, then you'll have more demand for places. And some people are turning around and saying, with the bubbles and with the room structures that I've actually got more people requesting places than I can provide. While in other areas, we know there's people who are saying, well, we've reopened. I've had to open only 2 or 3 days a week because that's the level of demand that I've got, and working with some of the 15-hour or 2-year-old funded children, it's actually been a challenge to reach out to those parents to let them know they can come back into nursery. So it varies a lot on where you are, but yeah, then we asked, based on the occupancy that you've got and the increased operating costs, what does the next few months look like for you? And 71 and a bit % said that they're expecting to run at a loss for the next 3 months, so that takes them up to September, and 23% said that they would just be breaking even. So it's a really, really tight situation for the majority of people out there. And we know this, and still there's no recognition of that from the government. We keep putting that forward. They keep saying, and before this crisis even happened, there was a research report by the DFE earlier last year which said that over half of private nurseries already were operating at that break even or running at a loss level. And it was even higher for voluntary run settings. I think it was nearly 3/4. So even before coronavirus hit, the Department for Education knew that those were the figures people were looking at, and still all they were able to offer was a 1.8% increase in the hourly rate, and that wasn't even for everyone. So
wow. Okay, I'm sure everybody on the call agrees that the whole funding structure and what's happening at this terrible time is a national disgrace. And so we're thankful for the NDNA for raising, and the other bodies for raising this with everybody. Just as a quick aside, I talked to a small setting last week, and they had very, very few children in, and they started doing some adverts on Facebook, and within a couple of weeks they got themselves full. So it's certainly something that everybody should be looking at. The other thing that another small chain I talked to last week did, they just started emailing parents saying we're starting to get full, even though they weren't. So they were starting to, shall we say, manage the demand by implying there was scarcity. And that was a really useful thing for them, and it got them full really, really quickly. So just a couple of things to think about. And clearly the timing of this webinar is great because we've got Tricia and Maureen who'll talk a little bit more about improving businesses at this time. But a couple of questions for you then, Jonathan, and please, anybody else who'd like to ask a question, please reach down to the chat button at the bottom of the screen and ask. But the first one, Jonathan, is from Emma, and she's asking if to qualify for the JRS bonus, do staff have to remain furloughed until the end of October, or will it be applicable if taken back earlier?
So we've only had the sort of headline announcements and a little bit of background released. They are promising to publish more guidance about it in July. So we don't have a date for that yet, but as it's been announced, we understand that it's anybody who's been on the furlough scheme. So any employee who has been on the furlough scheme, so has completed the 3-week minimum, has been claimed for, as long as they remain on your books and are, the Chancellor talked about it being protecting high quality jobs. and that's where the £520 a month comes in. So if you bring somebody back and you reduce their hours to 1 day a week or something like that, you might not get there. But if you bring somebody back to to more usual hours, you should qualify for that. Yes, as soon as the full guidance is out, we'll be sharing that with the sector, and exactly what people need to do, whether there'll be a claim process or whether it'll be automatic, and all of those points. But yeah, we understand that it should be anybody who's been furloughed, and if they've been brought back at any point before the end of the scheme, you should then be able to receive that bonus when it comes through.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. So the next question from Lindsay is really asking about the element which they'll be entitled to. So clearly, with the furlough scheme, as it's part publicly funded, people have only been able to apply for a percentage. So do you have any sense on that? I know that's probably the most controversial subject today, given what happened when it was announced back in March, and then I think we had a U-turn. I know our certain minister thinks we didn't, but that's what I...
Yes. Yeah, the minister said that they'd been clear from the start, but we saw it very much as a U-turn, and I think most people in the sector shared that, and that's the point that I was coming to at the start. Is it's another way in which the sector has lost out because of the way it's structured, and the funding is structured. You can understand entirely a government's desire to avoid paying people twice for not being in work, but at the same time, because then the retention bonus, the job retention bonus, is linked to those furlough, and you were told if you get 40% of your income from the public sector, then you can't furlough 40% of your staff, then automatically you are excluded from receiving 40% of that bonus. And it's like I say, we hope it's an unintended consequence, but again, it's just an example of the way the complexity in early years really hampers the way people can operate their businesses. And whereas again, a bar, cafe, or whoever, you close, you furlough all your staff, it's fairly straightforward. You get the 80%, you pass the 80% on to your staff, and then you get the bonus for all of the staff that you bring back. It's nice and straightforward. For early years, you're heading back to the spreadsheet and thinking, well, is it this, is it that, can I get this, what my income's gonna be? And I just want to say about the autumn funding, again, we've been asking the department for clarity on that, because people are starting to plan for what they're going to have coming in September, October, November, because that's part of your business planning, and without that information, it's a struggle.
Yeah, it certainly is. I suppose the frustration for everybody in the sector is you and your colleagues are representing us lovely with ministers, but we've been fighting this fight for some time, and now it's got so much worse. What can we all do to help you support the fight, if you know what I mean by that question? It just seems that we've been having the same questions for such a long period of time, and whether it's through NDNA or PLA or Champagne Nurseries or whatever any of those bodies are, we don't seem to have made any significant progress. So I just wondered how we could perhaps support NDNA and the others at this terribly difficult time.
Yeah, I mean, it is incredibly frustrating, and so I've worked in other policy areas where changing direction takes a long time, and that's something that as a sector we don't really have, and so in terms of supporting the work that we're doing, like I say, obviously we're doing a lot of that work at a national level. We're always trying to get case studies into the press about the impacts. We always want that to be before the worst happens, but sometimes the coverage or the attention from politicians doesn't come until the worst starts to happen. And we said about the Chancellor's announcements yesterday, you can't have a plan for jobs without a plan for childcare, but it won't be until people start not being able to return to work and citing childcare as an issue that this will start to happen. We present information every year about the number of settings that close, the number of people who can't operate on the funding the rates they're given, and time and again the response from ministers comes back that that they don't see any evidence of stress in the system or strain, and they think that if a setting closes then another one will open, and they're looking at overall numbers of families who are accessing childcare, and that's their issue. What we can do to try and change that is getting early years up the political agenda, and that's why I was talking about getting MPs on board. We know that it's a struggle, and quite often you'll get a response from your MP that just totes the party line, and you think, well, what has actually changed? And it's a little bit about that volume, because I mentioned how schools are a big part of the political agenda. And if you think about it, children are in schools for at least 11 years, whereas maybe you've got a family with you for 2 or 3 years, and it's not soon forgotten. Obviously, you have a big impact at the time, but when an election comes around 4 years down the line, that family's no longer thinking about their childcare concerns. They're thinking about schools. They're thinking about what their child's going to go on to after that. So it's really, during the general election campaign, we tried to get parents on board as well as providers and politicians. So banging on that drum with your local representatives, because they're the ones who who should care about whether their families can get childcare, whether their local economy is going to be hit by by the lack of it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jonathan. So there's a couple more questions, if I may.
Yeah.
You mentioned that on the website are a load of resources. Do you know whereabouts on the NDNA's website there are?
Yes, yeah. So if we've got a main coronavirus web page, and under that there's several headings like the work that we've been doing with DFE and the answers that we've got from them. But then under that there's resources for managers and then resources for practitioners. Some of them are freely available on our website, so things like support for children, and some information on bereavement and things like that. But some of them are freely available publications for our members. So if you log on, then you'll be able to access those. So the main route in is our coronavirus information site.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, I've got a question here from Kerry. And I'm not sure if you're going to be able to answer it, Jonathan, so forgive me.
I'll do my best.
A legal question, but even if you can't, it'll be a great example for you to take away. So Kerry is saying that she's been losing £1,000 a week. She's got some staff who were furloughed, some staff who were not furloughed, but she needs everybody to return in September on reduced hours. Yeah. However, she's got a couple of ladies who are pregnant, and is wondering if there are any employment law issues if she reduces the hours for those pregnant ladies, specifically those 2 ladies, rather than everybody across the board.
Yeah, it depends on, well, it doesn't depend exactly, but obviously once someone starts onto maternity leave, there are different protections in place. In terms of pregnancy, we know that once people get past 28 weeks, it shifts their risk. So there are issues around that as well, and those may want to stay on furlough or may want to take time off work if they're concerned about their health. In terms of whether the fact that they're pregnant affects their employment rights, I would suggest that she speaks to our legal helpline. I'm not immediately aware of any issues. Obviously, whenever you're changing staff terms and conditions, consultation is really important, and I think that applies across the board. But we do, there's information through variety of organisations out there. And if she is a member of NDNA, then she does have access to our free legal helpline. So that's also a good route to take.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. I think my view on that is that Kerry would need to treat all the staff exactly the same, but I'm not a lawyer or employment lawyer either, so I agree with you. I think she should try your employment helpline. So we're going to wrap that up at that point, Jonathan, and say thank you so much for your time today. We really do appreciate NDNA joining us, and you specifically joining us for half an hour or an hour this morning. It really does help to get insight on what you are doing as NDNA and what you're doing on behalf of everybody here. So if we could all thank Jonathan. I appreciate you can't hear anybody, but you can hear me. So thank you very much, Jonathan. We appreciate it.
And thanks for having me, and thanks for everyone's time as well. If anyone has follow-up questions, if they get in touch with NDNA, we'll do what we can to help.
Great. And what we will do at the end of the webinar, we'll send out a copy of this recording later on today, and we'll put all the contact details for all the speakers onto that link. So thank you again, Jonathan. We're going to have a 3 or 4 minute comfort break, everybody, because I don't know about you, but it's time to get a cup of tea. And we'll regroup at 1/4 the hour, if that's okay with everybody. Thank you very much. See you. Don't log off, everybody. Just keep your screens on. But we'll see you at 1/4 the hour. Right, everybody, we're going to kick off again. So I hope you managed to use the loo and grab a cup of tea in that very short break. One of the things which came out there is something we said about making sure you're marketing your setting really well. And Parenta actually has a guide on that. So we'll include that in the notes which are coming out this afternoon. So anything that we can do to help and support on that front, please do let us know. So we're going to move on, and I'm absolutely delighted that we're joined this morning by Tricia Wellings. I've known Tricia for, I think, about 5 years, Tricia. For those of you who don't know Tricia, she's an experienced early years expert. I think most people probably do, but she's known in the sector for her support and the training that she's been providing for the last 21 years. She has a lot of specialist hands-on knowledge, particularly in the fact that she runs her own set of, I think it's 5 nurseries, Tricia. She's also got qualifications around an NNEB, BA Hons in Early Years Education Studies. She's an EYT and has lots of other qualifications, but I'm not going to read them all out. So Tricia, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Over to you. Please tell everybody the very important things that you're talking about today, which I think is something really after my own heart, about getting the numbers right and making sure you understand how and where you're making your profits.
Yes, indeed. And thank you very much, Alan and Parenta, for not only putting on these events, which are very supportive for the sector, but also for inviting me to come and talk to people about getting the numbers right. So I've prepared a PowerPoint that I'm just going to talk through really as my prompt to run through, you know, the numbers and everything with people. I think essentially I want to highlight how important the numbers are in being able to track and support keeping your business sustainable. I find that numbers are often one of the least liked things in early years, and not the numbers of children we've got, but the numbers involved in the finance of the business. So nobody ever really got involved in early years to be able to just have to do invoicing, accounts, funding reconciliations, and generally trying to make the books balance. So hopefully over the next few minutes, I'm going to be able to share some top tips with you to help you move your business forward during these trying times. Alan's given you a little bit of my background. I've been running Bright Kids Nurseries for 21 years. So I've sort of walked the walk, so to speak. I've become, over the last couple of years, won some awards. The Nursery Management Today top 10 most influential, because as Alan indicated, I've become quite vocal in the sphere of early years, and my life is essentially revolves around everything early years. Obviously, during the last sort of 3.5 months, like the rest of you, I've been sort of juggling everything in respect of keeping the business going. We've been open throughout that time. I think we closed one nursery and joined it to another because they were very close together. But we've been through all the struggles that everybody else has. And the nurseries aren't my only business, though. I do also have this training and consultancy business. And that actually just came to a complete standstill. Everything other than a mastermind group that I could turn online, which was great. So it's given me time to sort of reflect on what we do. I mean, we do similar things to other organisations, but in a slightly different way, because they're all practice-based, all systems and toolkits that we use within our settings. And we're just sort of restructuring a little bit now and moving. We're still doing training, a bit more so online now, but we're moving into sort of the group resources now. So we're going to try and reinvent ourselves over the next few weeks and months. But our objectives today, so what I'm here today really is to talk to you about is obviously looking at how we can move forward from this impact of this pandemic. So hopefully I'll give you some tips and hints about developing a powerful financial plan, something that you can start working on and start moving forward with straight away. So this plan is aimed to help you increase your profits, improve your business overall, and help get you some time back by putting in place measures that means you've got the information to hand very quickly. So I find sometimes in our sector, we spend a lot of time sort of running to stand still. It's almost as if somebody says jump and we say how high. And it's because we have such a myriad of not just legislation, but the way that our income comes into us and things. And we've been caught out, obviously, on the job retention scheme in that respect. And for some people, it's been quite a struggle trying to actually just get hold of some of those numbers, work out what those numbers have been as well. So what I'm advocating is really that an informed nursery owner is one that is able to then be able to get their hands on those numbers quickly and easily, and just to sort of make their life a lot less stressful. I've actually used a business model in my business for nearly 10 years now, just after the last recession, which is going to see in significance, I think, compared to this one. And this business model looks at all aspects of the business. So I'm glad that Alan sort of mentioned about the marketing side of things. We've had people talking about the HR side of things. So we liken this model to a body, to the human body, whereby you've got your leadership and your management. So that's, you know, your head and your organisation of organising your whole organisation there. You've got the finance side. Now your finance side is your torso. So your torso is, you know, contains the beating heart and supplies the essential organs of the body. So like the body takes in food for its energy to thrive, our finance strategy is to convert our services into an income revenue to feed our organisation and to help it grow. We use the operations and the HR as the legs, which help carry the business forward, and the arms and the sales and the marketing, which is grabbing those opportunities. But ultimately, we need all of these to be able to function and have the complete being in order to be able to move forward and to walk. So if you wanted to find out more about that orbit, there's a free webinar that we're putting on in August. The website address there is where you can register for that, and that'll just go in a little bit more detail into the areas. Obviously, I'm doing the finance today. Okay, so looking at financial management. I'm not going to go through the whole thing today, but these is basically set out in levels, structures, 5 levels, ways and things that we need to do in order to be able to get a handle on our finances. So some of the important key tips here is for you to be able to actually access and know what your historical numbers are and the ones that you'll create in the future. And we'll look at that in a little bit more detail in a moment. Very often, it's difficult for us as business owners to make decisions because we haven't got that information. So we need to look and find out, you know, if we haven't got that knowledge, how are we going to get it? Because making decisions on the future of your business through, or not making a decision at all, can be more detrimental over time. And it's unfortunate that we are beginning to see now settings close due to the pandemic, whereby they're not sustainable, so they've just made the decision to close, which is a real shame for the industry as a whole. Obviously, when you've got these numbers, and these aren't just financial figures, but these are just numbers that can affect all aspects of your business. Once you've got these numbers and you're measuring them, then you can manage them. You can manage them to improve them, because without having that baseline information, then you don't know where you're trying to get to. So knowing where you want to get to by having targets, key performance indicators that you want to achieve, by taking the scores and managing those to improve is all a key component parts of managing the business as a whole. So I like Warren Buffett, who's the 3rd richest man in the world, so obviously knows something about money. He only has 2 rules. Rule number one, don't lose money. And I think in a climate where the government is giving us less money to deliver a service than it costs us to deliver, those are wise words, and words that we need to actually take on board and work out what we need to do. His second rule is, well, very simple really. See rule number one. And I think that kind of basically says it all. You know, we're all here, we're all here for the children, but we're actually all here in business in order to be able to essentially make a profit. And I still feel sometimes that profit is a dirty word in this industry, but actually without it, and if you're a charity, if you're a non-profit making organization, you still need to be making a profit. You need to be making a surplus. The only way that you can pay back borrowing is through making a surplus. The only way you can reinvest in your children and your settings is through making a surplus, making a profit. That profit doesn't have to go to shareholders and things like that. It can be reinvested, but it needs to be made in the first place. So that's a really important thing that we need to get into our mindset. So how do we look, how do we know, whether we're going to be making a profit or able to make a profit? Well, again, we need to have analysis, we need to have reporting. So these financial foundations for every business, these are things that need to be put in place if you haven't got them, and we can talk about through what your starting points can be if you don't have this at the moment. And I appreciate many of you will, but I'm going to start drilling down into the detail of that and seeing how it could be improved. So we're going to control our resources by budgeting, knowing what we've got to spend and planning that out, and then reporting back on that. How well are we doing against our anticipated budgets? Things can get out of hand sometimes. A simple example of where things I introduced for budgeting, I introduced budgeting for staffing costs, I introduced budgeting for resourcing, resources and things for the sites. And in actual fact, what I found was that they were far more resourceful than I was, because I would probably tend to just go out and buy something because I thought, oh, that looks good, or that'll be useful. Whereas they were working to the budget and just buying what they needed for the children. So sometimes by delegating things down and having that reported back to you, it can actually make a saving, because potentially there's less emotional purchasing going on there maybe. So I would say, for example, how often are you getting reports in for things like, are you looking at your profit and loss? If actually you're just waiting for your accountant to come to you at the end of the year to say, oh, this is how well you've done, then that's too late. We need to be looking at information historically, yes, and those are things like your profit and loss account, a balance sheet, your cash flow. How is your cash flowed out through the year? Are you having peaks and troughs? What are your debtors looking like, the people that are owing you money? Who do you owe money to? What is that analysis looking like? Can you take advantages of that? What ratios are you looking at within the company? And do you have a scorecard? So looking at all this historical information can help inform then your future. So your starting point really for creating financial information that you haven't got is looking at your history. Then you can start sort of looking forward and creating those budgets, creating those forecasts, setting those targets, those key performance indicators, and doing some financial planning in that respect. So once you can get these core systems in place, then obviously it's really going to help inform you, and you'll become that sort of informed business owner. Now, all of this includes, obviously for us, all that information about funding and how is our funding impacting on our costs, and is it enough income for us to be able to deliver our services. So this is just a simple spreadsheet, like an Excel spreadsheet. So if you don't currently have any financial systems in place, then you can just create your own. And a profit and loss is basically, at its core, your income and your expenditure. There are certain things and certain rules about what you put into profit and loss. Obviously, any sort of income can go in there, be that funding, fees from nursery, fees from out of school. You might get milk funding, different sorts of things like that. You can break that down if you wanted to. You could break that down into babies, toddlers, preschool. You could break the whole sheet down into different rooms if you wanted to. If you want to get some really detailed analysis, that's the sort of thing that you can do. And then with your expenditure, it's really all your outgoings. But in a profit and loss, you don't put in things such as the capital repayment in any loans that you have. You just put in the interest. And this is what catches people out sometimes. And it's about understanding the dynamic of how some of these sheets work from an accountancy perspective as well. So if you're not doing anything at the moment, it's very simple to set up a little spreadsheet, and I've got templates that I can help people with as well in that respect. But it's important that you start to analyse things. So going back to something I think that Jonathan said about our break-even costs, how many of us actually know what it costs to deliver an hour's worth of childcare in our setting? In order to do that, you will have needed to have done some financial analysis, and you have to have some sort of starting point for that. Obviously, looking at all of your costs. If you haven't got anything at all at the moment, then the thing to do is we go back to your annual costs last year. Go to your accounts, right? What are all of our overheads? So you can take those annual costs. Now you'll have to bear in mind annual costs. The way that we all run our business is completely different. May or may not include like the directors' dividends, for example, if that's how they pay themselves. If you've had some exceptional expenditure last year, then you would take that out. So it's really, you know, what it generally costs you just to run the setting for that year. Divide that by the number of weeks that you're open, so that might be 51 or even 38, and then look at that as divide that by another sum, which is the number of sessions that you offer times the number of places. And sessions you can use, most of us do sort of 2 sessions a day, so that would be 10 sessions. And then you would divide that by the number of hours in each session. So if you had 10 sessions a week, 50 places, that's 500, and then you've got your costs there, the figure there, and that will bring you an hourly cost. Obviously, if you want to work that out for each room, because we've got the different ratios for children, you would have to break everything down. Take you back to the profit and loss to break everything down. So yeah, it's a bit of piece of work to do initially, but once you've got there, you can just feed in figures and see how your business is performing. And that influences then what you need to do, because there's no good reacting, like for September, there's no good reacting in August and saying, oh, we haven't got enough children, what are we going to do about our staff? Okay, we've got furlough at the moment, but that's going. And essentially we need to start looking at, well, are we over capacity? And yes, great that the Chancellor's put in £1,000 for January, but that means they have to have been furloughed. They have to have then been at some point unfurloughed by the end of October, and we've still got to employ them for 3 months. If you don't need those staff, that £1,000 isn't going to, make up for all of those costs that you've incurred. Obviously, it's then relating to, you need to work out what do you need to do to keep those staff and get that bonus, how many children do you need in, and those sorts of things. So something else that we often get ourselves caught out on is the discounting. So we've set a price, we've worked out our break even, we've set a price higher than that, and then we go and discount it, which is actually costing us, it's halving our profit and reducing our capacity to make any sort of profit. So basically, if you're taking a 20% gross margin and you make a 10% price change, then you're either going to, if you reduce that, you're going to make 10% less profit. But actually, if you increase it, you're going to make 10% more profit. Or put another way, you're going to, well, it's in money, it's half as much again. So looking at these figures here, if you were making a 20% profit and then decided to discount by £10, you made the price £90, then you're going to lose, you've halved your profit. But if you increase your price, then you've got half as much again. So really consider what you mean by discounting, because it could have a bigger impact on you than anything else. And actually, I did use, and I probably got it off somebody somewhere, I increased our prices, and not surprisingly, our profit went up. But also, because I'd started managing money, our costs went down as well. So ultimately it went up even further. This is the whole thing about your financial management. Once you start focusing on it, it makes a huge difference. This is really important as well. A lot of people did get caught out with the coronavirus job retention scheme. We were okay. Our income funding to private is 76% to 24%. So in actual fact, and we didn't furlough all of our staff, we were able to claim the 80% of all the staff that were on furlough. But this whole 80-20 rule. We should be aiming, you know, for 80% of our income to be coming from private and 20% to be coming from funding. Now, it doesn't mean to say that we only have 20% funded children. We might have 60 or 70% of our children as funded, but we need them to be paying some private income on top of the funding. And especially the children who are 30-hour children, because you know, these are parents who are actually working. Now, we're going to come into difficult times, we're going to come into changing times, we're going to have to look and be a little bit more flexible on our provision. But essentially, we can't be giving this away for nothing. We have to be charging for what it's costing us, our extra resources that we're putting into our nurseries. So, you know, the government, for example, isn't expecting to pay for, I don't know, a Mother's Day card for every mother who attends childcare, though that's an additional resource, potentially, something you've chosen to do. But in the same way as your food and you know, all the other things that the government cite, there are plenty of things we do that we're not charging parents for, but that are costing us. So we have to be mindful of this gap that we have in funding and look at ways in which we can recoup the deficits. And that's a way how you construct your price list, basically. What sort of offers you're giving to parents, what sort of choices you're giving to them in respect to delivery of the funded hours, and trying to make that dynamic so that you've got much more of your private income, which helps the business survive, basically. So it's not about offering less funded places, it's about being able to charge an amount that takes you above your break even in order to make you sustainable. So I'll give an example here, which is just an example of maybe a 10-hour day. Now, if we were offering that with funding, then we might say to parents, well, there you go, there's 10 hours, there's your free day sort of thing for the funding. But actually, if you're only getting £4 from the government, then you're only getting £40 for that day. So what we do is we kind of restrict the number of funded hours they can have in that day. We've used an example here over 3 days, so they can take sort of just under 8 hours a day. And there we have a figure that actually we're getting for our funding. So what we then say is, well, we've got a difference here of 2020. That becomes our additional charge. Wraparound care, additional service, that's all your food included, that's all the activities that we do, that's what it's going to cost you. And then we'll obviously we don't present it in this way to parents, but we just say to them, right, 3 days a week, all year round, this is what it's going to cost you per month to have that. So that's just one example. There's plenty more that we're going to have time to sort of run through at the moment. So just a couple more slides just to go through. So the second level, having got all of that profit and loss and understanding of your numbers there, is looking at your debtor and credit control, basically. Here's just some tips about things that you can do to improve your cash flow. So very much at the moment, look at ways in which parents are paying into the business. Do you need to set up some new payment terms for parents? We've got to make sure now more than ever that parents are paying up front. And I know that's difficult in some areas with some parents. But you know, if we're not fiscally responsible, then we're not going to be here, sort of thing. So make sure they're paying promptly. Have systems to chase them up, and make regular reviews of your debtors list. Pay your suppliers later. Are you paying up front for things? Let's get things on account. You know, that gives you a good 30 to 45 days to pay things. Keep your cash flow forecasts up to date so you know and understand what's going on. And just, you know, understand your position, try and reduce your overheads. It's great that we've been able to have a rates holiday. Yeah, we do need to all get onto our MPs about that, definitely. my MP is Nadeem Zahawi, ex-childcare minister, now sort of business minister. So I regularly write to him, talk to him, tell him about all the problems. I was writing to him almost weekly throughout the coronavirus thing, and I kind of got the feeling he was listening, because then something would be announced. So, you know, don't think that it doesn't have an effect, and MPs will only listen to their own constituents. So, you know, whoever your MP is, just write to them, and eventually they'll all start talking to each other. So the last thing that we do is, obviously, how do we know these numbers? What are we looking at? How are we measuring them? How do we monitor them? How do we improve them? So we create a dashboard, basically. So it's just everything brought together, all the key things that we want to monitor come together onto a dashboard, and we call that our company scorecard. So it includes our company scorecard is our weekly, and then we feed that into a monthly, and measure that against the targets that we've set. So we'll look at our income and staff costs ratio, which is a very important one. That instantly tells me if the business is under threat. If that percentage gets to 70%, then I know that we're in trouble. If we're 50% and over, then yeah, things are really healthy. Usually, generally for us, it works out at around 60-odd%. But it will depend on, again, the team. I have a senior head office team. For some settings, you know, that probably averages around 50 to 55% if you're sort of an owner manager, or it should do. And if it's not, well, work out why not. The debt levels, obviously your debt levels means it's money not in your bank, and that affects your cash flow. Inquiries and visits, this is informing your future occupancy. You know, how many inquiries are you getting? If you're not getting enough inquiries, as Alan said, you know, make phone calls, chat to people, do Facebook ads, get people talking about you and get those inquiries in. How many sessions you've sold, how many people are starting and leaving. No good having loads of starters if everybody's about to leave. Of course, we have this big exodus every September. So we should be starting working on that in April and May to compensate for the ones that are leaving. Sick days can give you a measure of the morale within the company. Complaints and accidents, you know, what is the quality of your delivery if all of a sudden your complaints and your accidents are going up. Professional discussions, you know, are your supervisions all on track? And obviously looking at those specific profit and loss margins and things. So we create a sheet that we monitor and measure. Haven't been able to do that so much over the last 3.5 months, but we're just getting set to get back into the things that we were doing before. So just as I finish up, just want to offer people on the call 20 minutes free strategy call. So if you really are struggling with something and you just want to talk something over, then, you know, happy to offer you 20 minutes of my time to help with that. If it's a bit more detailed and you need a little bit more specific help, I can't promise to make miracles, but £99 crisis call. And if you wanted a full funding consultation package, then I can offer that as a couple of hours with you, talking through what you're doing, and then a support and progress checks to follow up on terms and conditions, price lists, and all of those sorts of things. And you can register for that on the MBK training support page. And then, so thank you everybody for listening. Don't forget, I've got that free webinar as well if you wanted to find out more about the orbit. And yes, that's me done. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Tricia. That was really, really interesting and really, really relevant at this time, isn't it? One of the things you talked about there was the impact of the hourly profit going up or down when people discount their fees. I don't know if most people are aware, but there was a study done by one of the big accountancy firms a couple of years ago, and it says that if you can increase your prices by 5%, it increases your profits by 40%. So it's the reverse of the example that Tricia was just giving. But just think that through: 5% increase in profits. So, you know, adding more extra charges enables you to have 40% more on the bottom line. So I think that's a really, really big deal. So Tricia, you have not left us a great deal of time, but we've got a couple of questions coming in. No problem at all. I think it was Chris who turned around and said he agreed with you completely about the £1,000 for when people come off furlough. It's not a lot of money. If you end up not being able to sustain those staff, then I'm not sure you keep them on for £1,000. So, and I agree entirely. And then beyond that, Tricia, Penelope asks do you do it all on a spreadsheet or do you use a special computer program? She goes on to ask, how involved are your managers on the side of things, or is it all done at head office?
Okay, so we have systems that link and join in with each other. Our invoicing system links up to our accountancy system. We can then produce those reports. So, I mean, our managers do our invoicing, for example. They would complete information on inquiries, visits. Because that financial information is automated, we can do that at head office. So the answer to that is a bit of a mix. Ultimately, it's about finding the right person for the job, and which doesn't necessarily have to be you, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the manager. It could be, you know, a virtual bookkeeper sort of thing, who all the information feeds into, and then they will feed the information back out in a form that you want it.
Very good, very good. Thank you. Susan said Tricia was brilliant. So thumbs up to you, Tricia. That's nice to hear. Thank you,
Susan.
Susan. We're running out of time for any more questions, so I think we'll park it there, Tricia. So if everybody could just join me in having a silent clap to say thank you to Tricia, really appreciate it. I think there were so many insights there, and I strongly recommend that if you are struggling in any way with your financial aspects, do jump on one of Tricia's calls. It sounds to me to be a bit of a no-brainer. So use that. The alternative, and here's an absolutely shameless plug, but the alternative is you could read my book, which is Improving the Business of Childcare, and that also talks quite a bit about the financial aspects of running a nursery. So forgive me for my shameless plug, but why not? So everybody, we're going to have another very quick break, and let's call it for just 4 or 5 minutes. Use the loo, grab a cup of tea, and then we're going to move on and listen to Maureen Askew, and she's going to also talk to us for about 20 minutes. Thanks again to Tricia, and see
Alan,
you. Yes.
I was going to say, I'll try and answer a couple of these questions in the chat while people are on a break, if you're happy with that.
Perfect. Absolutely brilliant. So if we could regroup people at just before 5:02, that would be lovely. Thank you, everybody.
Oh no, lost it.
Okay, everybody, let's get started again. So I am absolutely delighted to welcome this morning Maureen Askew, who is going to talk to us about funding support during and beyond this COVID situation. Maureen's a chartered manager. She has over 30 years experience, of which 15 have been providing business advice, support and guidance to established and startup nurseries. She has previously worked for the Preschool Learning Alliance. She's set up, run and managed day nurseries and preschools, and she's currently a trustee for a charity, I think, with 4 settings. So with that, I'm going to introduce Maureen and ask her to take it away and talk to us a little bit more. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. No, it's still morning, sorry. Thanks for inviting me to take part and to be here. What I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to run through some of the COVID available, just so everybody's aware of it, and then I'm going to look at additional support that you can get that's out there, and particularly if you're a charity and things. So I have got a presentation which I'm now going to try and share with you. First time I've done this, so we'll see how this goes. Let's have a look. Bear with me a second while I do this. Okay. Okay. So we'll now. So that's what I'm actually going to talk about. So you probably should be aware of the majority of this support, but I just wanted to just reiterate it to make sure that everybody is aware of it. I have put the links for the website so that when you get the slides later on, you will be able to just click on it. Now, obviously, I'm hoping that you all know about the job retention scheme, which obviously affects all our nursery staff. That actually does come to an end on the 31st of October. So you need to be aware that in between now and then there are going to be slight changes. Now, the changes will be, this is as it was when I actually did these slides, and I don't believe it's actually changed. In August, you're still going to be able to claim 80% of your salaries for your furloughed staff, and you will pay the national insurance and the pension scheme. In September, that 80% reduces to 7%. Once again, you'll still be paying the national insurance and your pension. And in October, it will actually decrease to 60%, with you actually paying the national insurance and the pension. You will obviously have to, when it goes down to 70% and 60%, it is up to you as an employer to make sure that your staff get at least 80% of their wages. So you will have to pay that additional 10 or 20% salary of deferred staff. So just so you are aware of that. If you do pay until 31st of the 3rd, 2021. So I know not everybody will be registered for the AT, but if they are, then that's really important. If you're paid, then you can also defer your self-assessment payments, and these are deferred until January 2021. That only applies to people that's actually owed that. Hopefully you're aware that the statutory sick pay will actually allow you to claim statutory sick pay for any staff that's been sick due to COVID-19, and you can claim 2 weeks statutory sick pay for any member of staff. So it's not a lot, but it does help a little bit. Business rates, as we all know, have been frozen completely by 2021, and we don't know whether that will actually come on 2021, but let's keep our fingers crossed and just see if that actually happens. One of the things that I've been waiting for a long time, because business rates can be extortionate to some people. So if we can get it so that it remains free, and you don't pay any, that would be absolutely wonderful. And you know, I mean, if we can't get that, let's hope we can get a reduced rate for everybody. There's also the small grant funding. This is a one-off payment.
Maureen, excuse me just 1 second. We're having real problems with your sound. Could you turn off your video and just see if we can just have the sound only from you, and I'm sure that would improve it. We'll still see your slides, but if you just turn off the video, I'm hoping we'll still see the slides. It'll be embarrassing if we don't.
Okay.
So bottom left,
So
where it says stop video.
stop video. Okay. Is that all right?
We're going to try that. We'll try that for a minute. Thanks, Maureen. Keep going.
Okay. 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 So I was on the small grant funding. This is for SMEs, because of course, as a childcare business, you're all classed as SMEs, and I think there's something that means small, medium enterprises. So that's up to 250 employees. So some of you will not pay rates anyhow. So you might find that because you don't actually pay rates, that you are eligible for a £10,000 grant, and it is a grant. That actually does, I think, come from the local authority. You need to check with the local authority about that. In a building that is rented, you rent a space from a building, you know, you're in a back jet hall or something, then it will be that the owners of the building actually do get that grant. Now, if that's the case and you are paying rent, then I would suggest you go and ask them if you can have a reduction in the rent that you're actually paying, because part of your rent will have been calculated to include a proportion of the rates that they may well be paying. So do actually double check and see if they'll actually give you a slight reduction. There is a discretionary grant which you can be eligible for if you aren't eligible for the small grant funding, and that is actually up to £25,000. Now, obviously you will need to go on to, this also comes from the local authority, but you will need to go on there. There are rules that you will to make you eligible, and this discretionary grant is actually to pay with fixed property costs. So you with things like paying the mortgage, if your mortgage paying the rent, provided it's actually below £51,000. So the rateable value of the building is below £51,000. So I think if we can just make sure that you know, just check it out. It's worth checking out. And then, so there's the actual website link at the bottom for you to be able to just double check whether you're actually eligible for all of these funds or not. There is also the the business interruption loan, and as an SME you can apply for this. It is a loan, so do have to be paid back. This there's a loan, there's overdraft. You could get support with invoice financing, and it's up to 5 million, and it's actually for 6 years and not 5. So I've just double checked that this morning, and it's actually 6. There's also a business interruption payment, and this is actually also a loan, and where the government will actually pay the interest and the lender fees for the first 12 months. The bounce back loan is probably something that most nurseries would prefer to actually go for. And this is a loan that is, it is a loan again, so it does have to be paid back, but it's between £2,000 and £50,000. Now the government will guarantee the 100% of this loan for the first 12 months. So that means you don't pay any interest and you don't pay any payments, and you don't pay any fees for the actual lender for actually arranging it. You can get this from your Try Your Bank. There's about 11 different banks and things that are actually supporting this scheme. So first of all, Try Your Bank, and if they aren't doing it, there is a list available on the government website of all the banks that are actually offering this bounce back loan scheme. It is made up of, the maximum you can get is 25% of your turnover or your profits. So you do need to, you can't think, oh, I'll just get 50 grand. You will need to actually fill in the details, and it will work out for you on the system what you're actually eligible for. The really good thing about this is the fact that the interest rate is set at 2.5%, which obviously is a very good interest rate. But it's set at that rate for 6 years. It's not going to change. Well, that's what's saying at the moment. It's not actually change. So you can, if you can afford, because you need to look at your finances, as Tracy was saying, it's really important to understand your finances, and you've got to be sure that you can actually pay this back. So if you do decide to go for it, then so long as you've made sure you can pay it back, then yes, I would say go for it. And then the support for paying business tax, because we all, you're running nurseries and you'll be paying tax. So you may be eligible to actually delay those payments without actually incurring any penalties using the HMRC time to pay scheme. Basically, you need to go onto the HMRC website, and they will, you just go to the system and tell you whether you're actually eligible or not. You may have to speak to somebody from HMRC, but it is a scheme that's there to actually help you. So do have a look at that if you think that would be helpful in managing your nursery getting back on track. So that's just a brief summary of what's available currently through the COVID-19 support from the government. But a lot of you may not well be aware that there are other, as an SME, which is, like I said, what you all are, you are businesses, and therefore you can actually go and apply for other grants that are available. There's a whole range of different opportunities. I've actually put a website there for you to actually have a look at. This is not COVID-19 related. These are just to do with the cost you want, so they're available time, and they do vary. So what I'm suggesting is you go on there, have a look, and see if you can actually find something that would be useful to you. Just as a matter of interest, there are currently 176 different schemes on that, going on that website. There are more. If you just went online and searched business support, then it would come up with lots of different things. You also need to remember, sometimes it's not about funding. Sometimes it's about other support that can be available. So for instance, in Lancashire, there is something called Boost, where you can get free business support and advice. There is also some funding attached to that that does tend to be with business expansion. So those sorts of things operate throughout the country. So if you just search for your, I would suggest you went onto your local council website for their business support section. And generally, there's a whole host of different things that you can apply for. Like I said, some of it is not about funding, some of it is actual business support. So you might get a consultant who will come in, or a mentor. You might get mentor support. So if you are struggling with things and you need some support, then quite often it's either free or it's actually low cost. So so it's worth going on to your website, the local council website, to just check that out. Just a couple of examples. Have a quick look, and if you're in Leeds have a capital grant for projects that create jobs and business growth. And Lancashire has funding for additional funding for training apprentices. So it's worth having a look to see if you can actually access it as well. The other is, some may well be doing research and development work without actually realising that's what you're doing. So what you need to do is just check with your accountant, if you've got one, whether you might be eligible for research and development relief. That can actually be a reasonable amount of money. So, so if you're looking at doing something new, looking at expanding your business, changing your processes, particularly if you're looking at developing anything to do with IT, then it's worth actually asking. There are companies available online where you can actually just put research and development, and they'll come up and they'll be able to offer you some support as well. So it's worth checking whether you might be eligible for a research and development grant. And if you are a charity, now I do a lot of this. I work, I'm a volunteer for 2 organisations. I volunteer for, as we said earlier, for an organisation where I'm a trustee. We have 4 nurseries, all of which we've been going through the COVID system with furloughing staff, etc. So we've got experience of all that sort of stuff. But I'm also a trustee for a local community charity, and I actually do the fundraising for them. So I'm very experienced at actually finding money. What I've done there is I've given you just a link to just one place where you can possibly source some funding. But I'll just sort of give you a few tips about actually looking for funding. Small pots of money are easy to go for. Something called Persinium Homes that does £1,000 grant, and you can apply every month until you get it. So that's worth looking at. It's just it's £1,000, not a lot of hard work to do, very simple form, and that's Persinium Homes. Persinium Homes. I can never pronounce it quite right. But also make sure you look at things like WH Smith, your Co-op, obviously Asda, the big supermarkets. Some of them have, Asda certainly has a large pot of money that they support a business every year with. And when I'm talking about a large pot of money, I'm talking probably about 30 grand, which would help a lot of people. And you just apply. And that's, apart from the ones where you put the tokens into the little slot things and get 500 or £1,000 or whatever, what they do there in areas. But grant funding, obviously, is very, very well sought after. So all the grant funders get lots of applications. And a lot of them just get chucked out at the very first point, purely because people haven't read the criteria and the guidance. And so they try to make their project fit when it really doesn't fit. So those applications just get chucked out of the window straight away. So before you spend a lot of time actually putting a funding application together, please read the criteria, make sure you meet it, and read the guidance for actually filling in the forms. Some grant funders actually have 2 stages where you might just have to put in a very brief synopsis of what it is you actually want money for. And then you get through that stage and you're asked to provide much more detail. Funding ever, or very, very rarely, actually done retrospectively. So don't apply for grant funding for something that you've already done, because you're not going to get it. Make sure you apply in good time, and be aware that usually there's at least a 6-month lead in. So if you apply now for a grant, chances are you wouldn't hear anything until December. Although there are some COVID-19 related grants that are actually turning applications around much faster. So if you have a look for some of those, then you might find that you can actually get some funding much sooner. When you're writing your funding application, it's essential that you stick to the word count. Some of them won't allow you to, the ones when you're filling in the forms, won't allow you to exceed the word count. So you need to learn to be concise and be able to say what you want to say in as succinctly as possible to actually be successful. Like I said, the competition for grants is very high, but it can be worth actually spending the time to actually fill in, to source the correct funding, and then to actually apply for it. I've been very successful in applying for grants for both organisations that I work for. So remember, the key to remember is you are an SME as well. Even you're a charity, you're a small business, you just got charitable status. So don't just look for grants that are for childcare. Okay, look for something that is what you're wanting to be doing. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people, nurseries, sort of they concentrate on, for both the sort of business support, for loans and business finance opportunities, but as well as charities, they just look for things that are childcare related, and so they miss opportunities. So I would suggest that what you do is you do try to be as broad as possible, and not forget that you are a business, and therefore you will be eligible for lots of different things. Your local councillors also, just as a little thing, your local councillors also do actually provide, they do have a small pot of money each, and so it might be worth asking your local councillor what their priority is for this particular term, and you might find that you can get a small amount of money from them. So even if it's only £250, £250 goes a long ways in a nursery, and particularly if it's a charity. So do check out those opportunities as well. I did actually write a guide on where you can possibly get some funding. If anybody would like it, I'm quite happy to send it over to Alan and the rest of the team, and they can send it out with the slides. I don't mind. It's just a list of where you can possibly get some funding from. So I'm quite happy to send that over. And that's my only little plug about myself. So then let's talk about managing staff holidays. And this is not just about the managing staff holidays during the lockdown and while you've got furloughed. My experience has been, when I've been working with managers and owners of nurseries, is that they don't have a system for actually managing the holidays. And it could well be that what they do is, member of staff will say, I'd like to book my holiday for 3 weeks in October, or 2 weeks October.
Maureen, excuse me. Sorry, I'm really sorry, but your sound's got even worse. So I think we're going to apologise and ask you to stop there. I'm so sorry about that.
Okay.
For whatever reason, your sound was getting worse and worse and worse. So what we will do, everybody, is include Maureen's slides when we send out the follow-up email this afternoon. And of course, we'll include Maureen's contact details. So if anybody's got any questions, I'm quite sure, Maureen, I'm going to speak for you, but I'm quite sure you wouldn't mind replying to any questions that anybody's got, given that we've had to cut you off mid-flow. So again, apologies for that. All right, we've had quite a few comments come in, Maureen, whilst you've been talking, and quite a few people saying that they haven't been able to access some funding. So I think you said you had a guide to that. So if you could send that over to Adele and Gail, if you don't mind, we'll send that out to everybody else. But a couple of other points which came in. Tricia made a really interesting point about how much she's been supported by her local authority, and also how she'd got a loan. I think it was a CBILS loan, which her point was it's better off being in her account than somebody else's account. And I think that's a really, really important point. You know, whether you go for CBILS or BBILS, so BBILS was the loan which is between £2,000 and £50,000. You don't have to guarantee it. So effectively it's free money. You do have to pay it back. But if it were me, and certainly for Parenta, I'd rather have it in my bank account than have it in the bank's bank account. We've just left it there. But if we were to need it, because, I don't know, there's a second wave or anything like that, to me, that's a bit of a no-brainer. And it's effectively free money. You can pay it back out of that element of cash. I think it was 2% or something. So if you don't use it, you just pay it back. But to my mind, better to have it than to not. So before we wrap up, are there any more questions that I can answer, or Maureen can answer for anybody? So Parkside Preschool, I don't have a name, are saying our staff are term time only and received their holiday pay in August. would we be able to continue with furloughing during August? If not, would we refurlough in September? Oh, that's a really good question. I haven't really thought about term time only. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if anybody else does, but if not, I would suggest probably speaking to NDNA and seeing if they've got a view on that. Gemma asks, can we apply for 2 loans? I wish we could, Gemma. So if you're a single entity, then you can only apply for 1 loan. If you're trading as more than 1 entity, so for instance, Parenta isn't 1 company, it's actually trades as 3 or 4 companies. So we were able to apply for both the C-bills and the bounce back, which is very useful for us. So it depends on your legal structure. I don't know, Tricia, you might be a good example. You've got 4 or 5 nurseries. Are they all 1 legal entity, or are they all independent?
No, they're all 1 legal entity, but for the other companies, the training companies and things I've been able to apply for bounce back for those, yeah.
Perfect. So I think that's a reasonably good answer for that one. It depends on your legal structure. Okay, Emma's just asked that one and I've answered that. Kerry, do we unfurlough to pay holiday pay and then refurlough once holiday pay days are used up? No, I think you keep, my understanding is you keep them on furlough, but I'm not an expert in that. We really needed the lady from last time whose name escapes me, but she was an expert on those sorts of things and she could answer that. Angela,
that would be Imogen, I think, Alan.
No,
Jackie Mann.
Jackie
Mann.
Was
Jackie Mann.
Jackie Mann. Sorry, I couldn't think of her name.
You can top them up to holiday pay during furlough.
Great, thank you for that, Tricia.
You can use, yeah.
Susan's asking, does the company have to be limited or can I apply for a non-limited company? My understanding is it does not have to be a limited company. What you do have to have is have the company registered, so you can be registered in other forms. So you could be registered as a limited liability partnership or something pre the COVID event, so pre-March, and you have to have had a bank account. Tricia was answering the question about term time. Yes, I think she was. Sorry, I just saw one there.
Do you want me to answer that quickly, Alan? What
Please.
My understanding is?
Please do, if you know the answer.
So if you're employing staff term time only, it depends how you pay them. If you pay them all year round and you're paying their holiday pay as part of that, then you can keep them on furlough throughout August. However, if you're only paying them for what they're working in term time and then paying them holiday pay in August, essentially they're not working in August, so you're not paying them for work in August. So you would have to pay them their holiday pay separately, and then you can refurlough them back in September during their working hours.
That's brilliant. One other thing which is really important for those of you who are self-employed, does everybody know that the self-employed can get a grant from HMRC? It's the SEISS grant, Self-Employed Income Support Scheme. And you can get a grant from HMRC just for being self-employed. You've got to have complied with certain criteria. But any of you who are self-employed, if you're employed by a partnership or a limited liability partnership, you just log on to the HMRC site, you register your details, and you get a grant. There was one issued in May, and there's another grant being issued in August. So definitely definitely something worth checking out. Okay, I think Tricia's just answered another few questions, so thank you for that, Tricia. But I think we're running out of questions and running out of time. So unless anybody's got any more questions, we'll start to wrap up. I think the summary is it's clearly a really difficult time for all of us in the sector. Whether you're in the sector directly, whether you're supplying it like I am and like Tricia is in part, it's a difficult time. The one positive that came out of, or the one very, very small positive that came out of the Chancellor's messaging yesterday is that everybody is now entitled to grants for bringing on apprentices. So up until yesterday, you would have had to pay a 5% contribution to the cost of an apprentice unless they were 16 to 18. And then, I don't know when this starts, but what was announced yesterday is that you now get paid for bringing on an apprentice. So if it's a 16 to 18-year-old, you get £3,000. If it's 19 to 24, you get £2,000. And if your apprentice is 24 plus, so 25 and upwards, you get £1,500. So I think it's not quite what we were all hoping for, but nonetheless, it's really, really useful to at least be able to put some apprentices on and get paid for doing so. And it's certainly a really positive start for those of us in the apprenticeship sector. So if anybody needs any help with finding apprentices, Parenta can help with that. Just reach out to us. And if you need any help with existing staff who you'd like to put on an apprenticeship, likewise, reach out and we'll do our best to help you. So I think that's it for today. Thank you very much, firstly, to our speakers. That was Jonathan Broadley from the NDNA, and we really appreciate NDNA stepping in. The legend, which is Tricia Wellings. Thank you so much, Tricia, for all of the advice you've given, not only in your own slot, but answering for me and for other people. I really appreciate your support. And also for the Ask Askew, Maureen Askew. Thank you, Maureen. Apologies again for having to stop you short. But the information there I thought was really useful, and clearly Maureen was implying that she's getting some really good success in applying for grants. So we could all do with some grant money. I'd suggest if you definitely look up the websites that she's put on her slides, and if you don't fancy doing it yourself, I'd give Maureen a call and see if she can help you, because that sounds like a bit of a no-brainer. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you from the two ladies from Parenta who've helped put this on. So it's Gail and Adele. I wish you all well, everybody. Keep safe. It's a difficult time. Keep safe. Thank you.